Or the secondary star, Chris Kelso. You are listening into The Price of Business. Good morning, everybody. We have a great show in tune today. First up is a great guest and a great contributor to The Price of Business. We have Hessam, and I don't want to mispronounce the last name, but I'm going to try it here, Lisa. Parzivand.
Correct.
I actually got it right the first time here for you.
You did very well.
That is great. Well, for all those listeners who have not listened in or tuning in for the first time, let us know who you are and what you do.
Yes, my name's Hessam Parzivand. I'm an employment lawyer. I joke that I'm a Iranian Cajun. I graduated from Louisiana State University in HR, and then came down to Houston and studied law there. And my practice is mainly employment law. I work for both employees and employers in the field, so it gives me a unique perspective. And when you add in my HR background and the many friends I have who practice HR, I really feel like I have a good viewpoint of it from all angles.
That is the Iranian Cajun. I love that, by the way. That is really good. Well, a lot of times things are going on. Obviously, labor law is extremely important. You have a lot. Obviously, we're in the mecca of employment here in Houston. We have an abundance of employers, and we have an abundance of employees. And obviously, the combination of those sometimes can be a great mix. But every once in a while, when something goes wrong, it can, cause some issues right there. And I know today, there's a specific thing you wanted to talk about in regards to the labor laws, which has to do with personal injury or injury on the job, I would say.
Right. And some of this will apply to even if you're injured at home. But the first protection that employees do have, if they're injured on the job, they do have protection under Texas has what's called a workers' comp retaliation law, which says and your employer has to be a subscriber to workers' comp insurance for it to apply to you. So,
and that's important to know also, because most people don't realize is the Texas Workman's Comp, it is an employer has to get registered and pay to be a part of that insurance, for lack of a better word, or that program. If not, and it's something to note, if you go and get hired and they don't have workers' comp, that means they're not subscribed to it. So.
Right. They're not subscribers, but then for the employee who is injured, it's probably at least a potential benefit if the employer has deep enough pockets. Of course, it's a potential benefit because then they don't have to go through the workers' comp system if they're injured, and they can pretty much hire a personal injury attorney. And the penalty for not subscribing for an employer is that the employer has pretty much no defenses.
Wow.
And so basically, a workers' comp, I don't do the workers' comp side of employment law. I'll do the workers' comp retaliation cases, but a personal injury lawyer would do the workers' comp side. But my understanding is that pretty much what the case is about at that point is whether the employee actually got injured on the job. Because if they can prove even a little bit of negligence, it doesn't even have to be over 50% or anything like that, then the employer won't be able to use the normal defenses that are present in a personal injury lawsuit. So I mean, you can't for example take a hammer and drive a nail into your toe and say, I'm injured, I'm suing. You wouldn't be able to do that necessarily. But basically, if as an employee, you could prove any level of fault of the employer, then you'd have a claim, and that's why many employers choose to go into the workers' comp system. And unfortunately for workers, our workers' comp system was reformed in the 1990s, I believe. It probably was a little bit out of control then. I wasn't a lawyer at that time to tell you, but it was reformed, and as a result of the reforms, it's tough to find a workers' comp attorney because there aren't enough economic rewards to represent employees in workers' comp matters, and as a result of that, you have a system that has a tendency to deny a lot of workers and really delay treatment to workers, who really deserve. I've had cases, because I do the workers' comp retaliation, where, for example, an employee didn't get the surgery that they needed for something like 6 months because they were fighting the insurance company. And a lot of things can happen in 6 months if you're waiting to get a surgery done right there. Right.
A bone can heal wrong. You can get an infection. A whole bunch of things can go wrong over that period of time, unfortunately. So then it ends up costing the system and the patient and the company a lot more in the long run, you would imagine.
Yes, I would think so, and it's surprising, but I've at least. When employees come to me, the workers' comp system does not seem to work very well in their favor, and I mean, and in reality, you're even if you could technically get a permanent disability under the workers' comp system, you're going to get 75% of your pay. So it's not like, oh my God, I mean. I'm sure there are people who abuse it, just like people abuse Social Security disability. Right. I'm sure there are people out there, but at least in my experience, I found a lot of good people who unfortunately can't go to a bad situation. End up in a bad situation, can't go to work for a prolonged period of time. I had one case where I had a scientist who worked with a particular chemical and knew exactly what the properties of that chemical was, because it was her job to work with it. And the workers' comp denied her, and they did some like really makeshift analysis of the chemical and denied her based on that makeshift analysis. And she was telling me, I know what this chemical does, Right. So, but anyway, back to the topic at hand. I guess I got on the soapbox for a little bit.
It's always good.
Back to the topic at hand. Workers do have who are within the workers' comp system, so their employers are subscribers. Regardless of the number of employees the employer has, they do have a right to potentially do a workman's comp retaliation claim if they're fired, shortly after their injury. And typically, the reason why I say if they're fired shortly after their injury, I say that because usually that's the best evidence that we look at. Nobody says, right, hey, employee, you're injured. We're firing you because you reported your injury. Usually what happens is, they're absent for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. They come back to work, and then 2 days later, somehow they commit some violation. Right. and they're gone. Companies, I represent companies too. Companies are very, very concerned about their workers' comp rates, the number of incidents they have. Right. Obviously, when an incident is reported, it does affect their insurance. So very important to note, a lot of people think that if you're under the threshold of 15 employees, a lot of employers think, oh, it's employment at will. And if it's under 15 employees, technically, a lot of the discrimination laws don't even apply. One law that may apply to those employers under 15 employees is the workers' comp retaliation law. So that's one potential level of protection. The next level of protection that the worker could potentially have, and this is another reason why employers have to be careful, is they may have protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm not going to get into exactly the nuances. The law is really evolving. The Americans with Disabilities Act was amended in 2008, and unfortunately, you would think since 2008, we would have seen a lot of appellate court precedent that would give us guidance, but it's still developing. It's a relatively new law, but I would advise any employer who has an injured worker to at least look
into it.
Yeah, at least consult with an attorney. I mean, if the injury is like literally something like a cut on the hand, obviously that probably isn't in the line of disability. But
a severed limb or something, a concussion or something that's major, let's say, from that perspective, really does need to be looked at, and obviously consulting with an attorney, as you mentioned right there, you, for example, would be excellent.
That would be one route, but definitely watch out, in terms of that, because that's another line of attack that employment lawyers do use, and that law applies to employers with 15 employees. It says you have to give a reasonable accommodation, but it can't be an undue hardship for your business. So there's so that's a very fact-intensive and fact-specific inquiry. And
what was the third one? And
then the final one is the Family Medical Leave Act. And this is for employers who have 50 employees within 75 miles. And I remember in Employment Law 101 back when I was in school, there was a question as to whether it's as a crow flies or if it's by road.
Right.
And it's 75 miles by road.
Okay.
But anyway.
And we don't see too many crows flying anymore, so I don't know how I'd measure that one.
That's true. So the Family Medical Leave Act, it applies 50 employees. If your company has 50 employees within 75 miles, it covers serious health conditions.
Okay.
And it gives you the ability to take up to 12 weeks of leave. So there's some overlap because the ADA provides for leave as a reasonable accommodation theoretically,
right.
But it wouldn't provide as much of a right to leave as the Family Medical Leave Act in most instances.
Well, we can sit here and talk about this forever. Unfortunately, we are limited time-wise, by the way. I think it's always very important for people to be educated and know what their rights are under these different types of laws that are in place to protect the worker and, in some cases, to protect the employer. How can we reach you if you don't mind?
Yes, sure. My phone number is 713-533-8171, and I can also be reached at, or you can find my website, www.parzfirm.com.
That is parzfirm.com. That is Hessam and Parzivand.
Yes.
Want to make sure I pronounce that correct. Thank you very much for being on board today.
Thank you for having me on the program.
You are tuned into The Price of Business. We are just getting started, but we do have to take a break and pay for this show somehow. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.